Okay. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. We're here at the founding convention of the People's Action Rise Up, Rise Up, Protest to Power Convention. Sitting here with Jawanza James Williams. He is a youth organizer with Vocal New York. Jawanza, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, as I ask everybody, why? Why are you here?
So I organize an LGBTQ youth organizing project called Queerocracy. It's made up of young people who are experiencing homelessness, who are LGBTQ identified, and I thought that it would be very important to bring young people who have these like very traumatic experiences to People's Action Rise Up Convention, founding convention, because it's really important that people recognize how everyday like traumas of their lives are influenced by like the political sphere, and how like homelessness is not the result of one's own volition, but oftentimes the results of failed government policies or policies that don't even like recognize our experiences or our identities.
Yeah, I mean, I look at, and I've been to New York a number of times, and a very wealthy city, yet used to have and still does have a pretty sizable homelessness problem.
Yeah, actually New York has an unprecedented historic issue with homelessness. In fact, right now in New York State is experiencing the greatest number of homeless people that's ever been recorded in its history. There's 88,000 people living in New York State specific housing shelters, so that's 60,000 in New York City at any given time and 20,000 throughout the rest of the state. And again, that's only the people that are being counted. So we have in New York State the greatest number of billionaires and millionaires, yet at the same time we have the poorest county in the country, which is the Bronx County. So it just shows you like in clear as daylight that the wealth income like
the inequality. Yeah, that's just nuts. Wow. So when you break that down, because we had talked a little bit before we went on air of how states look at homelessness and how the federal government does and how the numbers are calculated and how it's just kind of crazy and off the map.
Yeah, so I mean there's no, like, at least in terms of like documenting young people who are experiencing homelessness, especially street homelessness, like the definitions of what it means to be homeless changes based off of whatever agency is doing the count. So in New York City has a different count than New York State, and the state has a different count than the federal government, than HUD. So like how the like language used to describe homelessness determines if someone's homeless. So for instance, someone could be living on my couch and technically they're homeless, because if I decide tomorrow to kick them out, then they have nowhere to go. They're not on the lease, they have no protections. And then what do? They're on the street. So HUD would not determine that person to be homeless. Even if they were living in a car, they would not count in that count about like, well, who in the US is homeless? Like those folks are not being counted. So there's I'm sure thousands of people that are in that situation. And the reality is that puts many people, especially young LGBTQ people, in extreme risks of violence. So for instance, if I'm a person who is a sexual predator, or if I'm a person who's going to try to take advantage of a young person to force them to exchange, sex for shelter or sex for food, then and they're living on my couch, that puts a person at risk of all sorts of phenomena like violence, like HIV infection, like drug abuse, because of once a person is trading their body or trading sex for housing or for other basic necessities that humans need, they lose the ability to negotiate.
Right.
So you can't say, oh well, I want this housing, but I only want to have sex with you with a condom, or I only want to have sex with you as an individual, not with your friends. I only want to have sex with a sober mind. You cannot say that, because if you say that, then you lose the housing, you lose the shelter. And I mean, I think this is just connected to a greater issue of homelessness and of economic inequality and of people who are directly impacted or marginalized people, especially LGBTQ people, people who are black and brown, people who are historically poor. We're just not at the table, not like really at the center of policy that's being developed. That's on the municipal level, the state level, and on the city level. So to wrap that up, Queerocracy in Vocal New York, we try to work to bridge that gap, to make sure that people who are most impacted are not only at the table to inform policy, not to just share their trauma to bleed for the public for sympathy, but to use that lived experience as an authority about like, well, I understand how this policy will impact people because of the nuance of my lived experience, and also through our leadership development, through our direct action training, and through bringing people to events like this where we can sharpen those skills and sharpen that analysis that helps people be able to articulate and to be able to identify how something that's impacting them is connected to Wall Street, or is connected to Trump, or is connected to policies that are not recognizing or not acknowledging those communities.
You lay out those stories, and I got to be honest, as a parent, infuriating when you hear that stuff.
Yeah.
That in this country, the wealthiest country in the history of civilization, you have that kind of desperation on our streets.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is this is what you get when you have unchecked capitalism, unchecked oligarchy, in my opinion. At this point, the people that are most vulnerable are going to experience the most devastating brunt of what today we see these mass movements against Trump. Like we're talking about everyday middle class, working class people who at one point may not have been so involved politically, at least after like the New Deal period.
Right.
Then there was some of the folks who organized to make that a reality. But afterwards, I think there was a period of depoliticalization in the country after the
people
70s.
want to live their lives.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think the mainstream society were able to do that, but a lot of us, LGBTQ people, black and brown people, were not able to do that. And I think what we're seeing now today with the issue of like homelessness and HIV and violence against trans people in particular, like these are the manifestations of unchecked capitalism, of racism, of classism.
So what's the answer?
I think the answer is that we, again, have to organize. We have to build political power. We have to be intentional about what we mean by that. We have to make sure that everyday people that are maybe seeing on the news, a protest in the streets or a march, understanding that that march is only a piece of the work that we're doing. Like we're not just only waking up and we're going to march. And I like the phrase here that Rise Up People's Action is using, is like from protest to power, because it differentiates that what it means to really organize and to build political power from just protesting. Because I think that the issue that we can face right now is that with our mass movements against Trump, we're barely at 100 days. And we don't want folks to get tired and be like, oh, well, we protested a lot.
You don't want to burn out.
Yeah, it's not just that. There's other work to be done. And a lot of that work is to make sure that you are reaching the people that are directly impacted. You should have people, organizers, who are going into homeless shelters. The way we do our work, we go into youth-specific homeless shelters and we do teach-ins. We talk about these things. We help people develop a critical lens about what's happening to them and helping them understand what their own lived experience or their own situations, how the political climate impacts that. So I'll say, for clarity, I'll say, so if a person is living with HIV, let's say that because I know that very well as a person who's positive, I know that HIV is a biological phenomena that folks can protect themselves from using protection. However, like why are some communities more at risk than other communities for HIV? So when we scrutinize that, we find that the reason that the black men who sleep with men or LGBTQ people who contract HIV are at greater risk because of poverty, because of lack of access to healthcare, and therefore, if that lack of access to healthcare is connected to politics about who is eligible for Medicaid or who is not eligible for Medicaid? Is there a Medicaid? How is that Medicaid funded? If all of those things are connected to politics and we recognize that the community viral load is exaggerated by the lack of access, by poverty, by lack of access to healthcare, then we recognize that because of politics, my proximity to HIV is greater than, let's say, a middle class white person in Iowa who does not have that same experience, even though they have the exact same sexual and social behaviors that I do. Do you understand what I'm trying to say here?
I do, sure.
So I think it's people that are directly impacted need to be able to have that analysis, and they already do because that's their lived experience. People understand that, but folks also have to have a vehicle for change. Folks oftentimes who are impacted by the phenomena of horrible things that happen in our society and our planet oftentimes know how to say it. They know what it's there. Maybe sometimes they don't have the language to describe it clearly.
Right.
But oftentimes we know something's happening. We can name it, but then we don't know what to do. And I think that organizations like power building organizations like Vocal New York, like the Project Queerocracy, like People's Action, this network of organizations across the country, they're vehicles to be able to execute that political power that you build through building relationships with people, and those people being trained or being able to develop their critical thinking skills to be able to understand how their lived experience can inform policy and how policy will impact their lived experience.
So how do you take everything you just said there and give that to the folks here so that they take that home, and how do you use that outside of here?
I think it's very, like, we don't want to be very siloed and issue specific. We need to have an intersectional.
Well, no, because I think you hit on an important thing. I mean, healthcare, policy, homelessness, all these things, they're in the same stew.
Yeah.
And I think they're all important issues that regardless of your orientation or your place on the socioeconomic ladder, I think are all important.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing I could say to folks, especially to people that are not privy to organizing and that don't have like a background in organizing, or who know what I mean when I say that, you need to find out what that means. Like, we don't need to reinvent the entire wheel. Organizing has been around. Any big win that working people and poor people, marginalized people, anybody that's the 99% really has ever had, any win we've ever had, the New Deal, any win, saving the Affordable Care Act, all of that was not because FDR just woke up and decided to do the right thing. It's because workers organized. It's because people were fed up, they were dying, they were homeless, they were beaten down, and then they figured out how to concentrate that anger and that rage and build something that was, focused. So the way I like to think about myself as an organizer is, if you think about electricity, like, if I'm a conductor, like, if we have these radical ions, these radical, like, people who are experiencing, all this terrible shit in their life, and they know it's messed up. Sorry for my language. They know it's messed up, but if they just have the right set of words said, or like see the right things in the right way, then they can be activated into a cation, a positive ion that can do something. So, like, my job is to make sure that I am in the spaces where those people are. I have to go to them, meet them where they are, and that means in language and in the way that I talk about these issues, and not just like show up and be like, oh, and use very complicated language, but show up to people how they talk, show up to where they are, and mold your language and your analysis to help those folks and pull those folks along. So you want them to pass through the conductor, right, and become a charged particle. And the organization is that. And organizing, and the way that looks is you have teach-ins, you have community meetings, like, and that can look lots of ways depending on capacity. It could just start off in your living room. It could just be, let's all come together, let's identify the issues that are impacting us. Like, and if I'm like having a difficult time paying my light bill, and my neighbor is, and we all go to work 40 hours a week, like, why is that? Like, we need to really start thinking about what that means. It is not just because you're a small business owner does not make enough money. What is it really about? So, like, and just being able to know who are the power holders, like being able to analyze, like, where is power in my city? Where is power in my state? We know it on a federal level pretty much well, I mean, at least what is shown to us. Like, we know that, but a lot of people don't think about their very local politics. We have to think locally. And in New York City, that's a very different thing because it's a big city.
Right.
But I'm originally from Beaumont, Texas, and I know there it's a very different situation. It's a lot more approachable in that sense. Even though New York may have a more democratic kind of feel than a lot of places that I've seen in this country. And I mean, I guess that's going to be even more exaggerated in the future or today. But I think it starts there. It's like we have to think from the bottom up in every way.
There you go. Juwanza, I appreciate you taking time for us. Great talking with you.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it, Rick. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Back here from the Rise Up from protest to power. This is the Rick Smith Show. Right back. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com, here in Washington, D.C. at the Omni Shoreham Hotel for the People's Action Founding Convention. Rise from protest to power. I'm sitting here with Ejan Fu. She's one of the speakers here. Did a fantastic job yesterday. Ejan, thanks for taking time for us. So, you see this gathering, extremely impressive, right?
Yeah, it's massive. The energy is great. It's incredibly representative of really diverse communities across the country, from small towns to big cities, and everybody seems to be really united. powerful.
It's a lot of energy, but the thing is, we were just talking about this on the show the other day, that we're 90 days into this presidency, a little more than 90 days, and we're only 90 days in.
It's true. And most of these people have been organizing nonstop since day one. They've been organizing for women's marches, around health care. A lot of the people who are attending were a part of more than 300 actions in local communities around health care. So this is a group that's been rising up for the last 90 days.
Yeah, and again, it can't stop here, but you look at all of the policies that's come out of this White House so far, and I can't find anything good for we the people.
Oh no, in fact, it's the other direction. I represent a workforce that is the fastest growing workforce in the entire economy, care work. Whether it's child care or elder care, these are jobs that are growing because there's a huge need on the part of working families for care, and the growing aging population just means we're going to need more for the next few decades.
Certainly.
But the wages are poverty wages, and in our sector is the highest concentration of undocumented workers of any sector of our workforce, and a lot of the workers are incredibly already vulnerable, already earning poverty wages, doing critical work to support American families, and now are in the direct line of fire of some of the administration's policies, and it's devastating.
It is devastating. So when you hear stories like Paul Ryan was doing keg stands, dreaming about ending Medicaid, you got to wonder, one, what was he doing in college and what was wrong with him? But two, the policy is just horrible for working people.
It's really disconnected from what families actually need and want in this country. People need not less care, they need more. And they need it to be more affordable. And they need a whole new investment in work and care in this country. And Paul Ryan and this administration want to take us in the whole other direction. And they're trying to distract us by turning us on each other. And it's not going to work. And groups like this, the meetings like this, give me a lot of hope that we can turn things around.
And that's the hope. As I've talked to so many people here, it's that hope for tomorrow that we can fight and change and stop some of this horrible stuff.
And not just fight, but turn this protest, right? The theme of this conference is protest to power. How are we going to turn all of this great resistance energy, this desire to be active and show up, into real electoral power, power to win elections, power to take back and save our democracy?
And I've been talking about this kind of stuff for over a decade now on the air, of people getting involved and activated and educated and all of that stuff. Could Donald J. Trump be that moment, that spark where people finally become active and engaged in their governance?
I think it's already happened. I think the Women's March was the indication that this great movement moment has arrived. There are millions of everyday people who are ready to show up for each other, to show up for our democracy, and want to do things.
Right. So let me ask you this, because the right wing does a masterful job of boiling down messaging. We've got to know what it is that we want. What's the policy? What's the ask? What's the demand, if you will?
I think the vision long term is a healthy multiracial democracy based on fairness and opportunity. And in the short term, what we want is an economic agenda that's fully inclusive, that creates opportunity across very diverse communities in this country, and a set of policies that allows families to live well and thrive in the 21st century. So that's everything from, in my view, immigration reform to investing in our care infrastructure and creating universal family care for every family in this country.
Yeah, on the healthcare front, and this is, we just had the big fight. They tell us that another repeal and replace scheme is coming. I see it as an opportunity to really push for the single payer that I would have liked to see from the beginning. I'm curious your thoughts.
Absolutely. I think this is a time for a bold vision. This is not a time for incrementalism. The people want real solutions, and they're not going to be fooled by incremental tinkering around the edges. The pain out there is too deep, and so we have to offer a big, bold way forward.
Right. And that's an interesting point, because the anger is real. I mean, this election was really about anger. and you see those stories from Appalachia, you see those stories from rural America, people voting for Trump, and I don't know whether they know or not how bad it's going to be for them, but it was an angry vote.
I think that there has been pain in this country for a long time,
right.
And the levels of inequality and the levels of desperation in working class communities around the country, diverse working class communities, is just, I think, at a fever pitch. People are really suffering, and they need a different way forward for this country.
I keep asking, when Trump doesn't deliver, when all of the promises he made from the campaign are not fulfilled, and we know it's not going to happen, where do you use that anger? How do you direct that anger that was in that election in a positive direction to really help people? Because for me, it is really about helping people.
I think there's a tremendous amount we can do at the state level to actually move the ball forward. An example of this is in Maine and Michigan, we're working on bills for universal family care.
Right.
Basically one fund that will help families afford child care, elder care, and paid leave. Let's keep moving the ball forward. Let's try to make life better, city by city, state by state, and build our power in the meantime.
Yeah. I look at this, and what do you hope comes out of this? I mean, this is a great event. You got over 1,200 people. What do you hope comes out of this, with the energy and all of that?
I think events like this need to be happening all over the country, where we bring people together to feel our unity, to feel our power, and chart a path forward that takes us into a wave election in 2018 and to an election in 2020 where we have really strong candidates representing a bold vision for our democracy.
Now, what they're planning on doing here, I guess tomorrow, is bring out a bunch of candidates, people who are going to pledge to run for office. That's kind of that moving from the streets to the halls of power, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what it'll be, and I think it'll be incredibly exciting. And I know that there are candidates emerging all over the country. Within my organization, there are domestic workers and home care workers stepping forward saying they want to run for local office. It's really an exciting time in that way.
Yeah, I mean, you can hear the energy in this room as they're ramping up for the day's events. And again, the hope is you take all of that energy and all of that passion and all of that willingness to get into the streets and move it into a very positive direction.
Exactly.
Policy, I mean, at the end of the day, it still comes back down to what we can move through and get past this Congress right now.
Yes, I think it's policy. It's also about changing the narrative, about telling a story of this country where everyone belongs, where everyone can have opportunity, everyone can have a job, where one generation can do better than the next again.
The American dream, if you will.
The American dream.
And that's what Trump ran on, an idealized version of the 50s American dream.
Right. Well, that America doesn't exist.
I don't know that it ever existed, but...
Right, exactly. Here in this room is the America that I want to be a part of. Dr. Vincent Harding, civil rights leader, used to say, I'm a citizen of a country that has yet to come into being. And I think that in this room is a reflection of the kind of energy and spirit of a healthy, multiracial democracy in this country, and that's what I want for all of us.
I think that's what we all want. But Ajan, I appreciate you sitting down with me, taking a little time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Great talking with you.
You too.
Quick break right here. Welcome back to the founding convention of People's Action, the People's Action Institute here in Washington, D.C., as they have their Rise from Protest to Power convention. Thousands of people from across the country coming here to Washington to talk about organizing and where we go from here. And I'm sitting here with Joe Padilla. He is a leader with the Chicago Student Action Group, also the People's Lobby. Joe, thanks for sitting down with us.
Thank you for having me.
So what brings you here? What brings you out here? What's it get you here?
So I'm out here because I've been a leader with Chicago Student Action and with the People's Lobby for over a year, and I'm a college student at University of Illinois at Chicago, and we are seeing the impacts of the lack of a budget of Illinois. We are now in our 23rd month without a budget.
Yeah, 'cause you've got that crazy governor.
Yeah, we got that crazy governor, and we also have state representatives, a House Speaker that refuses to actually fight for us and will put his corporate interests before all of the millions of people in his state. So.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of it, I've been watching what's going on in Illinois, not good stuff. And look, where I'm at in Pennsylvania, we could be right there with a crazy governor as well. But you look at this and you look at those as opportunities to maybe get involved and take over at some point, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's why we also work to take back elections. We just elected a couple of people up in Evanston, which was incredible. My first campaign that I ever worked on was electing Teresa Ma to be a state representative for Illinois, and she was from Bridgeport, 2nd District, and we increased voter turnout among Asian Americans to numbers that we have never seen before, and we took marginalized communities and brought them together under one banner to defeat a person who was handpicked by his father to win that state rep position.
Wow. But again, you make an interesting point here. It's about bringing those marginalized communities together and bringing them out in numbers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a theme that I keep hearing here at this convention is, trying to reach out to those groups that have been, disenfranchised or, don't think that they have power, and bringing them together to kind of rise up in that vein, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the whole motto of this is everybody in, nobody out. So we have to increase our power by drawing across lines such as race, gender, class, sexuality, disability. I mean, these are power structures and oppressions that people have carried with them for hundreds of years. And if we're going to begin to deconstruct them, we need to all be working together and united against this.
Now, as a young man, as a college student, the world's open, to a whole bunch of avenues for you. I look at the future, and I got to be honest, as a father of 3 kids of my own, I worry about what you guys are inheriting.
Yeah.
Massive student loan debt, lack of opportunities. A moment ago you said you wanted to be a teacher, and my first reaction to that is, no, why?
Yeah, and that's a lot of people's gut reaction when they hear that someone wants to be a teacher. And it's not easy being a teacher right now. For me, going into being a history teacher in Chicago, there are 150 to 200 people competing for a single position, applying for that position. And that's not right. We have a system where we are not caring about our students at all, and especially in liberal arts, especially in music and art itself. And so we're just seeing that students are having profits and prices placed on their heads instead of actually educating our children because we care and because we love them.
So what's the answer here? I mean, because we're told you got to have skin in the game, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we gave you college for free, you'd just squander it. Got to have skin in the game. What's the answer to that?
The skin in the game is bringing in additional revenue. So that's why we fight for the People and Planet First budget. So if we implemented this budget, it could bring in $23.5 billion in additional revenue to the state. And this would be by closing corporate tax loopholes, enacting a LaSalle Street tax, and implementing a progressive income tax. Not an income tax that is even that entirely radical, one that's based off of the Wisconsin income tax even. And that could bring in billions of dollars into the state.
And what's the argument from Ronner and the rest of them that they can't do that?
Well, a lot of them are bought out by these corporate lobbyists and such, but they don't want to put their skin in the game themselves. They have these corporate interests, such as with Bruce Ronner, he received millions of dollars from people like Ken Griffin, who's the richest man in Illinois, like Sam Zell, who is also a billionaire in Illinois. They receive millions of dollars from these people because these billionaires have a specific agenda to keep things private, to not bring things into the public sphere, because that is not in their corporate agenda.
Right.
That doesn't help them make money.
Yeah. Now, coming to this convention, what do you hope to bring back? What are you hoping to learn? What kind of organizing are you hoping to accomplish here?
What I came here for and what I love is that this is more than 30 states that are all here. And when we're organizing in Chicago, especially in Chicago, we sometimes feel like an island. We feel this bubble, we feel disconnected not just from the country, but even from our own state. Chicago and Springfield are a world apart in a lot of ways. And so I really hope to bring back to Chicago and to Illinois this feeling that we are all connected and we can work across state lines to really win the campaigns that we need to make this a better world for ourselves and for our children.
That's the hope, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Joe, thanks so much for sitting down with us.
Thank you.
Great talking with you, Joe Padilla. Again, you want to check out our website, thericksmithshow.com, all of our coverage here of the People's Actions Founding Convention, Rise from Protest to Power. Quick break, right back.